Welcome. My name is Karen Lips, and I am the president of the Network of Enlightened Women, known as NEW. NEW educates, equips, and empowers young women to be principled leaders for a free society. We work hard to educate young women on conservative ideas. Today, I am delighted to be joined by now the youngest Republican woman in the House, Congresswoman-elect Kat Cammack. Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you.
Thank you, Karen. It's an honor to be here.
Wonderful. And to give a little bit of your bio to some of our viewers, she is a small business owner who grew up on a cattle ranch, a third generation sandblaster, who graduated from the United States Naval War College. And she is the former deputy chief of staff and campaign manager to Congressman Ted Yoho. So you have got quite a lot of experience there. And one thing to tie it to our chapters is University of Florida is in your district, right?
Yes, we represent the Gator Nation.
That's wonderful. We've got a good chapter down at the University of Florida and in some other schools in Florida. So I know they will be happy that we're getting to have a chance to talk with one of their representatives.
Absolutely.
So first, I wanted to ask you, what made you decide to run and why now?
You know, my journey into politics began about 9-10 years ago. I'm the daughter of a single mother and third generation commercial sandblaster, actually, and had no plans to get into politics. I was actually planning on, after college, probably taking over the business, the family business, and then eventually ending up in the energy industry, because that's where my passion has been. And in 2011, it was April, we received the news that our family was losing our cattle ranch due to an Obama era housing program. And we found ourselves homeless for several months. So it was during that time, I had just graduated college. The economy was really struggling and I was having a tough time finding employment. And being homeless, that was just a really tough time for my family. And so I ended up getting a call about 4.5 months into being homeless from a guy named Ted Yoho. And he said, I'm looking for someone who's motivated and scrappy and gritty and is really, motivated. And at that point, I had, lost everything. My family had lost everything. So I was ready to put all my life plans on hold and go take on big government at all costs. And so we had a 15-minute conversation and I ended up driving from Colorado to Florida. And I showed up on Ted Yoho's doorstep at 2 o'clock in the morning, and him and his wife, Carolyn, were probably thinking, oh my gosh, what did we get ourselves into? And the rest was history, because I joined the campaign, became the campaign manager, and then ran all of his subsequent campaigns. But after we won that first election, I was invited to join the official office and became the deputy chief for 7 years. So it has been a whirlwind, and I like to say, we make plans, but God laughs. And clearly there was something destined different for me. And so that's how I really got involved in that whole experience of not only just having, grown up in a small family business by a single mom, but then losing everything. That has really been the driving catalyst for me continuing to stay involved in the political process.
So it's fascinating that you've had both the behind the scenes experience as a campaign manager and then the experience of being the candidate yourself. Can you talk about the differences there, and especially from the attacks, right? As a campaign manager, you're seeing the attacks, but they're not quite as personal, versus as a candidate when you are the one who is the story and is the one being attacked. Could you talk about what that's like?
It's actually almost a surreal type of experience when you go from being behind the scenes as the campaign manager to then being the candidate in the face. As the campaign manager, we would take hits from our opponents, and politics these days is just a blood sport. It is anything goes, and people can make up wild, ridiculous stories and lies about you, and then it's your job to basically debunk it as you go along. And in some ways, there was a freedom as a campaign manager to really go to bat and fight back hard for your candidate. And now as a candidate myself and now member-elect, my opponents made up wild stories. One of my opponents actually concocted an entire fake life story for me. And
Wow.
yeah, an entirely fake life story, gave me a new mother, new grandparents, made up all these wild accusations. And at some point you have to make a decision, as difficult as it is, to dignify these accusations with a response. And we have always been the happy warriors. We always focused on the positives, because I believe, like so many other Americans, people are sick and tired of the negative. Tell me what you're going to do. If you can't run on your own merits and tell me what you're going to do for your constituency, you have to tear someone down. You have no business being in a leadership position. So we made the very difficult decision, and trust me, at times when there were hundreds of thousands of dollars of negative ads coming at me, and they were tearing my family apart and attacking my family and my husband, it was awful. But we made the decision never to go negative. And when people would ask me about it, in one-on-one settings, or the press would, we of course would answer those questions, and they would say, oh, well, this is ridiculous. We're not going to run a story like that. And, that was the ways that we combated it. But, addressing it, we just thought would give more legs to these crazy, wild accusations. And so it's definitely harder, I would say, as a candidate, to respond to the negative, because you at that point have to make that decision. How hard are you going to fight back? Are you going to punch back so hard that you give that credibility to the story? And we just made a pledge early on. We want to be the happy warriors. We will go factual. We will talk about the facts. We'll talk about the issues, but I'm not interested in personal attacks. And I think we'll carry that through as a member when we get into some very fierce policy debates on the House floor. Absolutely. So definitely a different experience.
Well, and did they attack you for your age as a millennial? Can you talk about any attacks you faced for being young, running for office, and how you hope you might be able to change campaigning going forward, or DC as a representative?
We got attacked for a couple of different things that was very disheartening. I had messages from people saying that I should know my place and that I should be at home taking care of my family. I had quite a few messages like that, actually. But I also had the benefit, I guess you could say, of being the youngest in my primary. And I was in the largest primary field in the state of Florida. And being a woman, being young, people saw that as a stark contrast in a very crowded field. And a lot of us, in a primary situation, your policies all kind of start to sound a little similar. So it was very helpful being such a stark difference. I'm 5'3", and bubbly and gregarious, and then you have a group of men that are, definitely bigger than me, and they all kind of sounded, in terms of their policy, the same. So it was definitely a way for me to set myself apart. And we used all those things that they tried to use in a negative sense. We used it as a positive. So they hit me because they said, well, she's too young. And I said, well, I have a lot of energy, and that energy is going to translate into productive work product, and we'll be able to get things done. And, everything that they hit me for as a negative, we turned around as a positive. So I encourage people, anytime someone wants to throw shade at you, find a way to basically do a 180 with it, because it can absolutely be a weapon in your arsenal to come back and push back that way.
That's great advice, because I'll tell you, a lot of our students face backlash as conservative women speaking out. And we find that it's really challenging, especially on college campuses, to speak out as a conservative woman. So I know many of our students are excited to have more conservative women on the national scene to look up to. What other advice might you have to conservative women who are struggling a little bit to speak out on campus or in their communities?
I experienced that very same thing when I was an undergrad in Denver. I had a Latin American politics professor that on my very first day of class told me that all world conflicts were due to white Republican men. And I was so just jarred by that experience. And then subsequently I found a double set of standards. Because I was a conservative, I wasn't able to rewrite papers the way that my liberal classmates were. And it was a very, very tough situation. I was told that if I wanted to pass the class, I had to acknowledge liberal policies were the best way in terms of a global context. And I refused. And as retaliation, my professor tried to fail me. And when we took it to the dean sided with the professor. So I took it one step further. I went to the university president and I made a big stink about it, because quite frankly, it is un-American if we are in fear of our opinions. The First Amendment does not just protect one thought process or ideology. It is for everyone. And just as much as someone has the right to express an opinion, they also have the right to be offended, and they can't silence someone. And having interns and young staffers that we've mentored along the way, I've heard some horrendous stories about professors joking about letting them out of class early so they don't get beat up in the hallway. Just ridiculous things that are just simply un-American. So I am right now making a pledge that I will go to any college campus and talk on any topic if they will have me, because we are Americans. We have vast diversity of opinions. And it's that diversity of thought that makes us stronger, not weaker. And so having conservatives that are outspoken in their classrooms is so important. And I'm just so disappointed that for so long they have been silenced. But as far as young women that are looking to get involved, or they're conservatives on their campus, I would say don't shy away from the things that make you unique. I have found in this business, particularly in politics, that women try to make themselves more masculine. They try to be one of the boys. Don't shy away from the things that make you unique as a woman. We have incredible attributes that make us stronger and better for various jobs because we are women. And I think it is so important that we embrace that. We don't have to be one of the boys. We can be just as strong and just as right there alongside them, but in our own unique ways. So we need to embrace the things that set us apart, not try to hide them or cover them up, because that's what society is telling us to do. And really, that is what we have to do to break away from this notion that conservative women are subservient or quiet and that we don't have opinions. No, we're pretty dang strong, and we're gonna come for a fight, but we're gonna be sneaky about it.
Well, it's funny sometimes the way, Hillary Clinton, her past comments, that part of the reason she lost the election was because supposedly the men in some women's lives told them how to vote. I don't know who the conservative women are that she knows, but the conservative women that I know are making up their own mind about this election and past elections for sure. So I appreciate your comments that we conservative women will stand up for what they believe in.
Absolutely.
And now you're in DC. You're here for orientation week. You've gotten a chance, I imagine, to meet the other newly elected women in the House. And I know I've written on it. There's been other stories about the new group of conservative women in the House. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Are you all working together? Have you set out priorities together? And what should we expect to see from the new conservative women in the House?
It's funny because we've been doing a lot of media, of course, and I hear from reporters asking, is there a new squad in town? First and foremost, yes, there is absolutely a new squad in town. Do we have a name for it? Not yet. But, I am so proud of this group of women. I think we're up to 17 freshman women. And in talking with them, these are, I'm just going to say it, they're badass women. They come from every background you can imagine. I mean, mothers, wives, CEOs, executives, military backgrounds, elected officials. These women are incredible. And just sitting down and getting to know them, there is definitely a sisterhood that has been forming. And, when we see each other walking from meeting to meeting or for an orientation, there's just little things that are kind of funny to me. We have a group chat, and the fellas were in one of our group chats. And yesterday my curling iron broke. It's not a problem that a man would have. And I was getting ready for an interview, and I said, "Hey ladies, does anyone have a curling iron?" And I know it's something so trite and small, but it's just that in previous Congresses, there wouldn't have been other women to ask. So it's nice to have that camaraderie. And then when we talk about the issues of how we approach it, these are incredibly strategic, smart women, and we are coming at these issues in new ways that haven't been discussed before from a woman's perspective, a conservative woman's perspective. So that is really exciting to me, being able to have fellow sisters on the Hill that, you know, we're conservative, we have that mindset, we're approaching these issues in ways that haven't been talked about. So I'm really excited. I actually was just on my way into the room and I saw Diana Harshberger from Tennessee. She's a pharmacist powerhouse. And, you know, we were laughing about some interviews that we were doing, and, you know, people want to know, what's the name of the new squad? We haven't had an opportunity with orientation to sit down and work on a name and really lay out the priorities. But mark my words, it's going to happen here soon.
Well, do you think there's any kind of themes or any reason there's so many more conservative women who are elected this time? I know in the 2018 cycle, in the 2018 cycle, there was one new Republican woman elected to the House. And this time it's double digits. Have any themes emerged about why so many more conservative women have been elected this time?
You know, given the diversity of where we all come from, you know, you got Maria Salazar in Miami area, accomplished woman, you know, an anchor, a reporter, very strong conservative, whose family fled, you know, a communist regime in Cuba.
What a powerful story that is.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just so excited about the stories. And so much of the reason why we do things has not been talked about. And the fact that platforms like what you are doing, giving these women an opportunity to share their stories. For me, it was going from homeless to the House of Representatives. For about 4 of our women, they have families, they're first generation immigrants, and they are fleeing from socialism. They know it firsthand. These stories are so incredibly powerful. And when we talk about why, you know, women were overwhelmingly accepted and elected, when the national pollsters and pundits were telling people that it was going to be a blue wave and that it was going to be the progressive women that were winning elections, we all knew. But the common theme when I talk to people like Michelle Steele out of California, we all worked our tails off. We ran ground games. We were not scared to get out there and knock on hundreds of thousands of doors and make those phone calls. And at the end of the day, I think that's what you're going to see on the policy side. We are going to work harder than anyone has ever seen before. And when you ask them about their campaigns, there was one common theme. They had a very strong grassroots army that was behind them. Whereas the left, they were inside. They didn't knock on doors. They didn't engage in a grassroots campaign. The Republican women did. And I think that's the difference maker.
That's interesting. And it's fascinating that it's really the local politics that matters, right? So as you come to DC, you know, you'll engage and probably go to lots of the events out here, but it's really focusing on your community back home that makes such a difference.
Absolutely. All politics is local, 100%. And if you want to be successful anywhere in the political sphere, start in your backyard at home.
Well, but now that you're here in Washington, I know our members would love to hear, what are your priorities going to be? What's the number one issue for you? What would you like to see happen during your first term?
You know, I have a lot of priorities. I think as women, we're list makers. I know I personally am. And so
I'm a list maker as well.
I swear, it's how our brains work. And so I have a laundry list of items and things that I want to accomplish for sure. But right out the gate, the thing that I think matters the most, not just to me, but my district, is rural broadband. We in our district, as in so many other parts around the country in rural districts, COVID really highlighted the need for access to high-speed, reliable internet. And it didn't matter if it was education, if it was commerce, if it was healthcare. If you didn't have reliable internet, you were at such a disadvantage. And I shudder to think of all the kids that, you know, school was shut down, it was canceled, parents are trying to homeschool from home. And there are some situations where parents aren't going to drive to the school and pick up paper packets. They're absolutely at a disadvantage for particularly rural areas or underserved communities. If they don't have that connection to their teachers and their schools via internet, they're going to be so far behind. And so I see internet as being the great equalizer in terms of providing opportunity across this country. And it's 2020. We have every every capability in the world. If we can put a man on the moon in the 60s, we should be able to hook up every single American family to the internet in 2020. So that's going to be my first priority, not just for the district, but for up here in our nation's capital, and making sure that communities across the country have that resource available.
Well, I think you mentioned earlier the diversity of the women coming to DC. I imagine that's an issue that congresswomen with more rural constituencies will be interested in, and everybody will have their own issues to talk about. And there's not just one set of issues that'll be driving things. What about COVID? What would you like to see happen regarding COVID?
The thing that has been really disheartening to me throughout this whole process, we shut down on March 13th in Florida. And the thing that I shudder always is a big one size fits all government program. I lost, my family, we lost our home because of a one size fits all government program. And it's these overreaching, blanket solutions that people try to enforce and push on communities. And it doesn't work. In times, it's actually more harmful than it is good. And so I would like to see a very pragmatic, common sense approach to a COVID response. I think what we have seen thus far in really trying to focus on deploying PPE into the areas where we're seeing hotspots, taking those simple common sense precautions, not these arbitrary shutdowns and killing industries. I can't tell you how many small business owners and women, particularly, who have been disproportionately affected, because women are typically business owners of retail and services and different industries that were right out the gate shut down and completely shut down, and they rely on a brick and mortar type of situation. That has got to stop. And I'm fearful that as we move into the beginning of next year, we could have a nationwide shutdown. That would be detrimental to our economy in ways that I'm not sure we would be able to recover, at least not readily. And so I'm fearful for that. We do see that we are going to have a vaccine by the end of the year. And that is great news for those that are a vulnerable population or have an immunity situation that makes them more vulnerable. We need to just go off of the science and the data that is backing up these decisions, not these arbitrary, we're going to lock everything down and shut everything down.
Well, thank you for your insight there. And you've mentioned a couple of times your story of going from homelessness to Congress, talked about the challenges Americans are facing during COVID. And I know you've got a foundation with grit in its title. Could you talk a little bit about your foundation work?
Yeah, that was something that it was really the genesis of a couple different things. The word grit is particularly special to me. It was one of the things that when we won our insurgency campaign in 2012 with Congressman Yoho, I was the only staffer. And in his speech on election night, he said, this 23-year-old with a whole lot of grit, she was able to pull together a winning strategy. And I think grit is the word that best defines not just me as a person, but really the team around me and how we approach things. And I'm hoping to take that same mentality of just grit and getting it done and that work ethic to DC. But the foundation itself, the Grit Foundation, being the daughter of a police officer and being married to a first responder, my husband is a firefighter and a SWAT medic. We saw firsthand, both through the work in a congressional office, but then being the spouse of a first responder, really the glaring needs and holes that we have within our first responder community. And I'm talking just very basic equipment needs. So as a deputy chief of staff, I was tasked with helping secure funding or resources for some of these departments, many of them being rural. And there were a couple of tragedies on our district where, because they didn't have the necessary equipment, we lost lives. We lost some very good men in the line of duty. And that became a calling to me of, we have to do something. And I started asking around. I said, what do we have beyond the big federal grants? And they said, well, the problem with the federal grants is by the time you actually get them, the strings and the burdensome regulations attached to them, we have to hire 2 people just to manage the grant. So it's just kind of like, it's not worth it at the end of the day. I said, but if you don't get that grant, what are you going to do? And they said, we're going to have pancake breakfast and we're going to try to raise the money ourselves, but it's hard because, you know, we're already on double mandatory overtimes and it's just crazy. And I said, you know what? We're going to form a charity. We're going to raise all the money privately. We're not going to accept a cent of state or federal money. We are going to raise it all from private sources. And then we are going to go from department to department and ask, what do you need? What do you need to do your job? Is it training? Is it going to a conference? Is it a ballistic vest? Is it a canine? Is it a particulate blocking hood? What do you need? And we have had requests that range the full gamut, from washing machines to ballistic vests to canines. And we have stepped up. We are now the official charity for 14 different police and fire departments in our region. We're looking to grow and meet the needs of departments all across the state and the Southeast, and hopefully one day the country. But I see that as part of my conservative values, making sure that the community is rallying and looking to a solution here at home versus Washington, D.C. I think when we start looking for solutions and coming together as a community, we're able to better serve and really be responsive to the needs of our community and our first responders. So it's really disheartening to me when I hear the calls for the defund police movement. You know, the first thing I see in the morning at home in Gainesville is my husband's SWAT vest on our kitchen table. And when people are screaming, you know, defund the police and all these awful things, I just shudder to think, you know, these folks probably have never done a single ride along. They've probably not talked to a spouse or a family member of a first responder. And if you're really serious about trying to heal some of the division in communities across the country between the community and the law enforcement community, the answer is not defund, it's fully fund. Because these folks, these men and women who put on a uniform every day, going out their front doors, not knowing if they're going to make it home that night, they are doing the very best that they can with the very limited resources and equipment that they are given. And so if we are going to get serious about this discussion, and I'm sure I'll be having this discussion with some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, we need to fully fund our law enforcement first responders. And it's a very personal issue, as you can probably tell. You know, my family is very much involved, but, you know, so I would like to see more grit foundations popping up around the country, really meeting this need, because I think it's so critical.
Well, congratulations on the success of your foundation.
Thank you.
And I really enjoy hearing your can-do attitude, very much an attitude of empowerment. And as our organization, we talk a lot about empowering women to build the lives they want, rather than trying to make women more dependent on the federal government. Really, that empowerment is so important. So I wanted to end by asking you, as an organization, we talk about opportunity feminism, a brand of feminism that truly empowers women to build the lives they want. Do you consider yourself a feminist?
You're the second person to ask me that in 2 days. And you know, there's a very interesting conversation that I had with my aunt, actually, here recently. She is a member of the Green Party. She is very, very liberal. We don't agree politically on pretty much anything, but we're family. We love each other. And we had a very interesting conversation about a week ago. And she said, I was talking with some of my friends, and we are so proud that we now have a Republican feminist in Congress. And it took me a minute just to kind of sit there and think about it. I think if you look at the very broad definition, I think we all, especially in politics, whether you're Republican or Democrat, you are a feminist, because you're going to champion some issues that really only we can understand in certain ways. But I've never grown up, or I've never really campaigned or said, you know, I'm a feminist. So I like the term opportunity feminist. So I might steal that.
Well, don't steal it, but you can talk about it. So any final words for our students about why women's groups are important, or encouraging them to speak up as they try to stand up as conservatives on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as a conservative, we believe in individuality and the uniqueness, and so whatever that unique thing is about yourself, about, you know, your beliefs, don't hide it, don't shy away from it. That quirk, that little unique thing about you is what is going to draw others to you. So never shy away from your beliefs. Really understand your why. And if you really at the core know why you believe something, or are championing something, or you're doing something, people will respect that about you. And so I encourage all women and conservative women, don't shy away from the tough discussions. Don't shy away from who you are as an individual, and certainly do not ever try to hide any of the unique things that make you you, because we need you, particularly here in Washington, D.C. Your country needs you. So please make sure that you are engaged in the process, and thank you for the opportunity for being here today.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.